Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Rochelle Harrison-Pless. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, a government shake-up with a mix of new faces and political veterans. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announces a cabinet reshuffle 2 weeks after coming to power. It's been dubbed the trial of the century in Burkina Faso. 84 people are in the dock accused of masterminding a failed coup in 2015, facing charges of treason and murder. Plus, it's all part of Kenya's latest crackdown on poaching. From tracking to attacking, special dogs are being taught how to protect the country's precious wildlife. Well, we start with a political shake-up in South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has asserted his authority, announcing a sweeping cabinet reshuffle on Monday evening, nearly 2 weeks after taking the reins as the country's leader. The changes included giving key portfolios to ministers who were fired by former President Jacob Zuma and giving marching orders to several Zuma allies. The South African leader has promised to crack down on corruption after Zuma was forced to step down amid a long-running graft scandal. Well, for more, let's cross to GRN correspondent Jane Flanagan in Cape Town. Good evening, Jane. Just talk us through some of the most significant appointments. Were there any surprises?
Well, the appointment of David Mabuza to be Cyril Ramaphosa's deputy has certainly raised some eyebrows. He is not a politician who's well known nationally, but he emerged as the kingmaker in the very, very narrow ANC leadership race, which ended in victory for Cyril Ramaphosa at the end of last year, just by 52% of the votes. And clearly, his appointment now as the deputy president is being seen as payback for that very important role he played in delivering a lot of votes for Cyril Ramaphosa, which really did secure him victory in the end. As you mentioned, the return to the cabinet of a couple of key figures, some safe pairs of hands that were sacked by Jacob Zuma, has been welcomed by the markets, and I think Mr. Ramaphosa has the credit ratings agencies in mind when returning Ntlele Nene to the finance ministry, and also Pravin Gordhan, another minister sacked by Jacob Zuma. He's going to have the tough job of turning around some of the state-owned organizations that were really hollowed out by Mr. Zuma. A number of the very controversial characters from the cabinet, a number of them haven't actually been sacked. They've been moved sideways or downwards, but put in lesser roles. I think Cyril Ramaphosa, mindful that his decision may come as a frustration to some, has said that his cabinet is transitional. And I think he's biding his time while he shores up his own position within the party and beds into his new role as president before he has another go at stripping out some of the dead wood.
And Jane, how have the South African people reacted to the cabinet reshuffle?
With a mixture of frustration and relief that 13 of those who were so linked to corruption and so synonymous by Jacob Zuma's toxic regime have been turfed out of the cabinet, but also frustration that Cyril Ramaphosa didn't go further. The leader of the Democratic Alliance has cited David Mabuza as entirely unsuitable to be deputy president of the country, and says the fact that Mr. Ramaphosa felt duty-bound to appoint him shows him that the new president is putting his own party's needs above the needs of the country. But other reactions have included that South Africa has one of the biggest cabinets in the world, with 35 ministries. That's almost double what we're used to in Europe. And so there is some frustration that he didn't take this cabinet reshuffle as an opportunity to really slim down and save some of the money that's going to be needed to get the country back on its feet.
OK, Jane, thank you very much for that. Jane Flanagan reporting for us from Cape Town there. Well, staying in South Africa, the country has taken a step towards the transfer of land from white to black owners. On Tuesday, Parliament voted in support of a motion to change the constitution to allow land expropriation without compensation. White South Africans still own most of the country's land after centuries of brutal colonial dispossession. Land reform is a key pillar of the ruling ANC government and the country's new president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Next, the Nigerian army says it's rescued more than 1,100 civilians from the clutches of Boko Haram. According to a military press release, more than 600 people were freed in a single raid along Nigeria's border with Cameroon. The announcement comes 1 week after the Islamist extremist group abducted 110 girls from their school in the northeastern town of Dapchi. The army is under increasing pressure to respond to the kidnapping and has come under fire for scaling back its presence at local checkpoints. Now, security was beefed up in Burkina Faso's capital on Tuesday as the country's trial of the century got underway. 84 people will be hauled into the dock of a military tribunal in Ouagadougou, accused of masterminding a failed coup in 2015. Two former generals, Gilbert Diendere and Djibril Bassole, are among those in court. The pair face charges of treason and murder. Julia Kim has the story.
Victims of Burkina Faso's failed coup have waited 2.5 years for this day. Their lives were shattered after Generals Gilbert Diendere and Djibril Bassole and 82 others attempted to overthrow 2015's transition government.
For more than 2 years, we've been asking ourselves, why did they want to destroy the transition? Why did they shoot unarmed protesters? With this trial, we'll finally leave the country of deception behind us and be on the path to the country of truth.
Deadly clashes in 2015 ensued after key allies of ousted former President Blaise Compaoré arrested the transitional leader Michael Kafondo. The plot was supposedly masterminded by Compaoré's chief of staff Diendere and then Foreign Affairs Minister Bassole. It was thwarted shortly after by protesters backed by the army. Diendere faces charges of conspiracy against the state, murder and assault, while Bassole faces charges of treason. But the victims are more cautious than optimistic about a guilty verdict.
I can't say for the moment that I have confidence in them or not. I'll see what happens. What is certain is that they promised us that there would be a verdict, so that's what we're here for.
Rights groups have called this a test of the credibility of the Burkinabe judiciary, but have pointed out that the military tribunal trying the case is exempt from official judicial oversight. Many have also criticized the secrecy around the trial. Mobile phones and cameras are banned from both inside and outside the courtroom, with journalists kept some 300 meters away from the building.
They're man's best friend. Now they're also Kenyan wildlife's best friends. Anti-poaching dogs have become crucial in the fight against illegal hunting. In the country's Mara Triangle, American trainers are teaching 5 puppies how to sniff out ivory and weapons. These canines with special skills will join a local tracker dog unit as Kenyan authorities crack down on rampant poaching.
Shikaria may only be 5 months old, but she's already in training, sniffing out a ranger posing as a poacher in the savannah. She's one of 5 puppies being groomed for a tracker dog unit in Kenya's Masai Mara Reserve. Top of her class, her trainers believe she's got what it takes.
Dogs that are active, dogs that like to eat, play a lot, things like that. But like I said, genetics and drives is what we're looking for, the proper drive to do the work.
This canine unit has become essential in the fight against poaching in the Mara Triangle in southern Kenya. Over 1 million wildebeest and tens of thousands of other animals cross from Tanzania on their annual migration, attracting hordes of tourists, but also poachers seeking an easy target.
They normally put wire snares, and maybe they can chase into valleys and use the machetes, the swords, and the pangas to cut them.
During migration season in July and August, the rangers find thousands of deadly snares set up in the park. The main challenge here is poaching for the commercial bushmeat trade, which in 2014 a government-appointed task force warned was reaching unprecedented levels. The canine unit has grown from 2 tracker dogs in 2009 to 4 dog trackers and 2 detector dogs trained specifically to sniff out ivory and guns at the entrances to the park.
There's still a lot of work to do, but we caught over, I think, 4,000 poachers in the last 18 years. So that speaks great, how much they put effort to it. Without that, we could have thousands and thousands of animals dead.
And with this next contingent of trainees, the unit is set to grow even further. The 5 puppies only have a few weeks left to prove they're up to the task, which is becoming more urgent by the day.
And finally, it's been dubbed the African Mona Lisa, a famous portrait of a Nigerian princess by the country's most celebrated modern artist, is set to go under the hammer. The beloved tutu, painted by Ben Nwanwu in 1974, was lost for more than 4 decades before turning up in a London apartment. The work is expected to fetch up to £300,000 at an auction in London this Wednesday. The event will be screened live in Lagos so that Nigerian art lovers can also place their bids. Take a listen to why this masterpiece is so significant.
Painted just after the end of the Nigerian Biafran conflict, she does symbol this moment of reconciliation and hope for the nation. I think the fact that she is also the most famous portrait by the nation's most famous artist is also incredibly significant, and the fact that she's been lost for all these years and finally discovered is truly an amazing thing.
We have to talk about its cultural significance in Africa, and I go further than that, as to say its cultural significance for the art of our times. I think people have begun to think of tutu as being kind of, I hate to use comparisons like that because they're evidently unsatisfactory, but it's begin to be thought of as kind of like the Mona Lisa of African art.
Well, that's it for now. I'll be back in around 45 minutes with more African news. Stay with us here on France 24.